Have spiritual people disappeared up their own bottoms? Is meditating all tofu sniffing woo woo, or can it be silly or even fun? This is a subject that I became very concerned about when I started to teach meditation. In this vlog, I will argue that spiritual facilitators can learn from comedians, fools, and performers in order to arrive at the spiritual awakening that they are indeed massive wankers. This is one of a number of vlogs in which I explore the relationship between stagecraft, creative writing, meditation, and the psyche. So if you're interested in any of those things, carry on doing what you're doing right now. In my previous vlog on poetry and meditation, I looked at guided meditation within the context of the oral tradition. That is to say, the ancient fireside practice of storytelling, shamanic verbal artistry, poetry, spoken word, rap, comedy, all of the many forms of vocal gobshitery, right? And I believe that guided meditations take their place within this heritage. And leading guided meditations is in fact a performing art, right? Where we use the voice to artfully affect changes to human consciousness. Indeed, this is something that it shares with comedy. Russell Brand, the artful gobshite and comedian, once described comedy as a shamanic practice. And when I first heard this, I'm like, hang on a minute, you don't get to call yourself a shaman, you're a comedian. But I do think there's a grain of truth in this, right? If only in the sense that comedy, especially in its live form, is intersubjective, right? It transcends the self. It's a form of transcendence, right? Comedians often talk about working the vibe in the room, working the crowd, warming up the audience, etc., right? It's based on complicity. It's based on consent, on consentire, to feel together, right? So there's this transpersonal chemistry that is shimmering through the room in live performance. And this is nothing if not spiritual in my experience as a performer. I found it to be intensely spiritual experience, being part of live events. However, there is a big difference between comedians and most spiritual gurus. And that is that most comedians, perhaps with the exception of Russell Brand, don't consider themselves to be the custodians of morality or paragons of wholesome living. Instead, they're usually very public about the fact that they are ultimately fallible idiots who fart, fail, and occasionally masturbate. The facilitators of yoga and meditation that I've warmed to the most have generally had that kind of like trickster archetype about them, right? They've been very good at mixing heavy subjects with light silliness and taking the piss out of themselves, which I think is kind of important. Humour creates a sense of openness and ease in the bodies of the people who are in the room, right? And this is one of the principal objectives of yoga and meditation. There's this kind of yin-yang dance between the sacred and the profane, the sincere and the ironic, and the serious and the silly. And in comedy, this alternating current is referred to as the fish out of water technique. What I mean by the fish out of water technique, an example of that might be, I went into the hospital the other day and the doctor said, you may want to stop masturbating. I said, why? He said, because I'm trying to take your blood. Now, a punchline like this isn't just a surprise, isn't even just a risk. It's a paradigm shift, right? It pulls the rug from underneath us, almost like a kind of like a magician that pulls the tablecloth from underneath the cutlery, right? And it leaves us shuddering in the realization that the tablecloth that we were standing on is actually a table, right? And this shaking and this laughing, I believe, is the highest form of spiritual joy. To laugh is to be ecstatic, literally from ecstasis, to be outside of oneself, right? When we're laughing, we are beside ourselves with laughter. So there is a kind of shamanic wizardry to the work of the comedian, a bit like the kind of emperor at the end of Star Wars with the electricity coming out of his fingers. You're kind of like you're sending people into spasms, you're sending people into convulsions, right? And it's nothing if not ecstatic, I think. In the words of the poet and academic Tony Hoagland, I quote, "The ecstatic is characterized by sudden lateral movements, disorganized surges of language and psyche. The god of ecstasy is Dionysius, the irrational, sensuous, blissed out deity. Laughter is about rapture. It's about rupture. It's about flow. And it has everything to do with spirituality." Don't take my word for it. Eckhart Tolle, perhaps one of the most influential spiritual gurus in the West right now, in this beautiful quote, absolutely nails why play is right at the center of meditative contemplation. And I quote, "With awareness, an inner sense of spaciousness arises that enables you to look at your own mind, which is to say the human mind, with a certain degree of detachment. Then sometimes you cannot help but smile or laugh at the human condition in its unenlightened state. Not taking oneself too seriously is a spiritual practice that I highly recommend." So to conclude, Eastern spirituality is all about deconstructing the fallacy of the ego. Thus, it shares its chromosomes with comedy and silliness. In the words of Emma Goldman, "If I can't laugh, I don't want to be in your meditation." As meditators who spend hours sat on our asses, observing our breath and contemplating our own death, we have to laugh at ourselves. We are massive wankers. My name is Pete Bearder, aka Pete Temp. I am a massive wanker. If you're interested in my wankery, I have a book here called Stage Invasion, which elaborates on many of the themes that we've been touching on in this vlog, other vlogs, and much there beside. I'd like to take this opportunity to send love and solidarity unconditionally to everybody who's got to the end of this video, and to thank the Patreons that enable me to afford the time to do the research and to record these vlogs. So thank you, Patreons. If you're not a Patreon already, you can get that book and another book and loads of free stuff. So check it out. Google Pete the Temp Patreon and you can get free stuff in return for small donations that support my work. If you have not done so already, you can subscribe to the channel by which you're seeing this. And if you're watching on YouTube, press the little bell button so that we can do this together again. Thanks for listening.